This is the Math 7 Chapter 5 Mid-Test Review, and this will cover rates, ratios, and proportions. So let's go ahead and get started. It says write the ratio as a fraction in simplest form. So we're going to be given a ratio, 16 dogs to 12 cats, and we need to take that ratio and write it as a fraction in simplest form. So remember, ratios have three ways you can write them. You can write them with the colon, the word to, and then in fraction form. So we're taking this form here, which is actually using the word to, and we're going to change that to a fraction form. And from there, we need to make sure we write it in simplest form. So we're going to find a common factor and divide that to simplify it. So 16 and 12, I automatically think 4. So I'm going to divide both by 4. See what I get here. So I have 4 over 3. Since we can't simplify that anymore and we were given labels, I want to go ahead and use those labels. So I'm going to write 4 dogs to 3 cats. And that would be our final answer there. So we're going to go ahead and do that on the second one. 35 girls to 15 boys. So I went ahead and wrote it as a fraction or in fraction form. We were given this ratio with the colon. So again, we just changed that form to fraction form. Here we have 35 girls, 15 boys. So I look at that and I think to divide by 5. So I'm going to divide both by 5. And I'm going to get, for my fraction here, I'm going to get 7 over 3. Again, I can't simplify that any farther, so I'm going to use the labels I was given. 7 girls to every 3 boys. And again, that would be our final answer. So that's writing ratios as a fraction in simplest form. Our next one says to find the unit rate. And remember, unit rate is per 1. So you're going to be given specific units, and you're going to have to find the unit rate for that. So our first example here is 180 miles in 3 hours. So I'm given this rate, and remember it's a rate because I'm given 2 different units here. So I'm actually going to write this as a fraction, 180 miles over 3 hours. And I want per 1. I want the unit rate. So I want per 1 hour. And it's most likely, most of the time, it's going to be that second piece that you're given is going to be what you want the per 1 to be. So here it's hours. So I need to make sure my denominator here is a 1. So I'm going to divide the denominator by 3. So I also have to do the same thing to the numerator. So I'm going to have that per 1 hour, which is what I want. And then I'm going to take 180 and divide it by 3. And I know 3 goes into 18 6 times, and I'm going to add that 0. So I know that my answer here, my unit rate, is going to be 60 miles per 1 hour. Our second one, 256 words in 8 minutes. So again, I'm going to take that and write that in fraction form over 8 minutes. And I want it to be per 1, so it's per 1 minute. So I'm going to divide my denominator by 8. I have to do the same thing to my numerator. And again, I'm given that per 1 in the denominator, which is what I'm going for. And then I have to take the 256 and divide it by 8. And we should get 32 words. So our unit rate is going to be 32 words per minute. Here it says use the ratio table to find the unit rate. So we want to know how many servings per package or per 1 package. So I can take any of these pieces of information. 3 packages is 13.5 servings, 6 packages is 27 servings, and so on. I can take any of those and find the unit rate. So I'm just going to go ahead and take the first one. 3 packages is 13.5 servings, which is great. I just took that from the ratio table, but that's not going to help us here. We want per 1 package. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and flip that around. 13.5 over 3, because I want that denominator to be 1. Now, you don't have to set this up and do it this way. Just this is how I kind of think through the problem. So I want to make sure that I have per 1 package. So I have that 1 package. I have to take my 13.5 and divide it by 3. And when I do that math there, that division, I should have 4.5. So it should be 4.5 servings per 1 package. So you can take any one of those pieces and do your division, figure out per one package, and you would still have the unit right there. This next part says tell whether the ratios form a proportion. So there's two ways we can do this. The first way is cross product, and the second way is simplify. So when we do cross product, if those products are the same, then they are in proportion. And if we, for simplifying, if we simplify both fractions or one, and they equal the same fraction, then they are proportional. So our first one, 3/4 and 24/18. For this one, I'm actually going to do the simplifying way. So 3/4 can't be simplified, so that saves me a little bit of work. This 24/18 I can simplify by dividing both by 6. And when I do that, I get 4/3. So now I'm comparing this 3/4 and this 4/3. If they are the same fraction, they're proportional. If they're different fractions, they're not. So here they are not the same fraction. So no, these are not, these do not form a proportion. Our second one here, 12/10, or 12 to 10 and 14 to 12. Again, I could simplify both of them, but when I look at my cross product here, my numbers aren't really that bad. 12 times 12 I know is 144, and 14 times 10, I'm just taking 14 and adding a 0, so it's 140. So again, these two cross products, they don't equal each other, so we know that this is also not forming a proportion. Now, if we did cross products and they had the same value, they would be proportional. But here, neither of these ratios form the proportion. Our next one here says tell whether x and y are proportional. So when we're asked this question, we could start with drawing a graph, or if we were given a graph, plot each one of these, like this would be 2, 5, 4, 10, and so on. We could do it that way. If we're not given a graph, I'm actually going to not, I'm not going to draw it. I think it's going to take up a little too much time. So if we were just given this and not asked to graph, I want to identify a certain pattern. So here, I know 5 goes to 10, it's plus 5. Same thing here, so I know that's the pattern. With our x's, it's plus 2 each time. So in order to see if these are proportional, I'm actually going to try to determine if x and y, if there's a 0, 0. Because if we're graphing, if we pass through this origin here, which is 0, 0, then it is in proportion. If we're looking at a graph, if there's a section on there that has 0 and a 0, then it's also proportional. So I'm going to go backwards, and if I go backwards, I'm going to subtract 5, which gives me a 0 for y, and I'm going to subtract 2 and get a 0 for x. So since there is that 0, 0 there, these are, x and y are in proportion to one another. Now, if we were to graph it, we would have to find that common pattern as well, and then see if it passed this origin there, and then if it did, they would be in proportion. If not, they would not be. So here we're looking to see if the two rates that were given form a proportion. We have 12 players from 21 teams, and we're going to see if that's proportional to 15 players on 24 teams. Again, we can do this either way. I'm actually just going to go ahead and do cross products on this one. And when I find these cross products, I do 12 times 20. And when I multiply 12 times 24, I get 288. And then I need to take my 15 and multiply it by 21, and I get 315. So no, since those do not equal each other, they are not, they do not form a proportion. My second one says 7 inches in 9 hours. Is that proportional to 42 inches in 54 hours? So for this one, I'm actually going to simplify. And I'm going to divide both numbers by 6. And when I do that, I end up with my right rate as 7 inches. And when I take 54 and I'm going to divide that by 6, I should get 9. So I should have 9 hours. And since this fraction and that fraction are the same, yes, these do form a proportion. Here it says use the table to write a proportion. It's just asking us to write one, not to solve one. And remember, there's a couple ways we can write our proportions. One, we can use the columns, or we can use rows. Either way is fine. I'm actually just going to pick columns because that's the first thing I think of when I look at a table like this. So it's 22 heartbeats over 18 And this one is for you, and the bottom one is for your friend. So you're comparing your heartbeats to your friend's heartbeats. If that labeling feels a little odd to you, you can just use the columns, and you can do 18 heartbeats per 15 seconds. If that seems a little bit easier for you to understand, you can compare heartbeats to heartbeats. You can compare heartbeats to seconds. As long as you're consistent, you should be fine. So here is our word problem. It says a school requires 2 computers for every 5 students. So 2 computers for every 5 students. I'm going to go ahead and stop there and actually write that rate. So I'm going to put 2 computers for every 5 students. And we need to write a proportion. Write that proportion that gives the number of C computers. So C equals number of computers needed for 145 students. So we know we have 145 students we are trying to find computers for. So we need to figure out how many computers we would have if we have that many students. So I'm given the 2 to 5 rate already. I need to make sure that I stay with my labels. So since students is in the denominator of my first rate, the students that we're given, the amount that we're given here, 145, also needs to stay in the denominator. And we don't know how many computers we need. So we just put C as our label. And we're actually, or our variable, excuse me. We're given that variable there, so you're not making one up this time. Sometimes you'll have to, other times you'll be given one. But this is just writing. Now, we could go ahead and solve for C, but it doesn't ask us to. So since it doesn't ask us to solve or find how many computers, we're going to stop here. If we needed to, we could either do cross products or use our mental math and multiply, or we could go either one of those routes. That would be fine. But here just says write it. So this is a proportion we could write. I could actually switch around these 2 rates and have C over 145 equals 2 over 5. That would be fine. But again, remember, one of the big points of rates are that they have labels. So make sure you are, whenever you're given a label, you are using those labels. So that concludes our review video. Go ahead and rewatch anything you need to rewatch. Go ahead and work some problems, again, if you need to as well. Study your notes, study graded homework, and good luck.